that, I'm going to want to eat chicken pot pie. Ready? Okay. It's good to see y'all. Hope the day has treated you well. Been a little chillier than I think we all expected, or at least chillier than my family expected. I had to put on a coat earlier, and I go, wow, I thought I was ready to put this away. Apparently not. We're back in Mark chapter 1 in this series. Sister Kathy will be coming in a second, looking at more about Jesus. And of course, recently we've looked at Jesus and his authority, but largely telling people not to tell what they have seen or to be quiet. Why? And as we pointed out, and as we've seen from a broader view of the Gospels, he did not want to feed into the misconception some people had about Messiah. He wanted them to give glory to God, but he didn't want people to get the wrong idea. And we might say, well, why would they get that idea? They had a large fervor for a military Messiah. They really wanted it. They were under the boot heel of the Romans, and there's a lot of anger, a lot of hurt. The Romans could sometimes be okay, but a lot of times they could be the opposite of beneficent. They could be very harsh. They could be problematic. And so the Jews very much wanted their freedom, but they also, some of them wanted revenge. That spirit of vengeance is never a good thing, but they oftentimes had that. And so Jesus didn't want to play into that. And if you remember, we looked at, I think it's John chapter 6, where Jesus feeds 5,000, but he notices the people want to make him king there. And so he just leaves where they are, just goes. He's not going to give into that. We might think, why would people think that? Well, imagine a guy that could raise the dead, feed thousands with very little, and heal wounds and hardships. That's called the perfect military leader, the way some might think. But that's not what Jesus was there for. He was not there to fulfill what they wanted, but what they needed. And so as we've seen, Jesus has went against the grain. He's got authority over demons, authority over sickness, disease. Now we're going to notice something about Jesus is his compassion. And that's something that's oftentimes talked about by people, a lot of times out of context, but Jesus was compassionate. And that's the thing I want us to understand tonight. But I am going to talk about a separate thing, and you'll understand why as we get into it. We're looking at verses 40 through 45. This is ending the chapter. And it's a little bit controversial with some Bible scholars. It says, now a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him, and saying to him, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Then Jesus, moved with compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him, and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. As soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy had left him, and he was cleansed. And he strictly warned him, and sent him away at once. And said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Now I'm going to stop there. We'll get to verse 45 here in a little bit. But first of all, we have a leper coming. So I want to go ahead and explain, as you already know, but just kind of go back to the background. Lepers were those that had skin diseases. There was, for many, many years, Bible scholars and commentators said, well, this was just skin disease. They didn't actually have leprosy in Israel at that time. Well, that has since been very much disproven. They actually found a tomb in Jerusalem dating back to the 1st century, and it was not open. It was actually sealed. And so they opened it up, and they found, guess what? A dead body. But it actually had skin left over. Ava, if you do not stop, you're going to get in trouble. It actually had skin still on. It had been so well preserved. Now, most of their tombs where they are put into are limestone, which helps with the dissolving of the bodily tissues. But a lot of times air will go through. This was so well sealed, probably because it was leper. It was so well sealed that it kept airflow out and actually preserved it. And they were able to do some testing and find out it is actual leprosy. Now, the law of Moses did make clear that any skin condition could be problematic and unclean. Now, you think about it, some people may have a skin disease that could be, could carry on to other people, so you have to keep distance. We don't like that, but that might be necessary. And so, though some have said there was no leprosy at the time, we know that is false. There was leprosy. And very likely, the lepers that are spoken of in the New Testament were lepers indeed. Being a leper, someone with a bad skin condition, but in true leprosy like this is, it's way worse than that. They could not be around other Jews. They were set apart. It was a horrible life because you could not be around your family and friends. You could not go to synagogue, which was their form of what we would think of as church service. They could not enjoy the feasts and festivals with other people. They were literally ostracized. And unfortunately, even if a lot of times it just wasn't their fault, there's nothing they could do about it, they would oftentimes be disliked and shamed and hated. I think we can all realize that's not the kind of life that should be the consequence of a condition outside of your control. But guess what? Even though we may not live in a highly ritualized society like the Jewish people of the first century, we see people ostracize others for things that are not their fault. We see it all the time, don't we? It may be that they have a condition. Have you not seen Down syndrome kids? By the way, are they not the sweetest kids? But how many will ostracize them and mistreat them? Or someone that has just a difficulty, something that's not even possibly their fault, and they'll be ostracized. Part of them being cut off in the first century was due to the Mosaic law because there had to be distance. They were unclean. And part of that makes sense. The mistreatment was unnecessary. And that's where the I'm better than you are mentality got there. This leper has already heard about Jesus. Even though Jesus' true, what we might call the year of fame won't be for a little later, quickly people hear about Jesus and his miracles. Especially quickly people hear about it, people see it, and people are amazed, and they tell others, and it grows pretty fast. Even if he's not yet highly popular, he is being made well known. So a leper comes to him, but here's what's interesting. He's imploring him. He kneels down to him and says to him, if you are willing, you can make me clean. That's faith. That's faith. In fact, Jesus oftentimes acknowledged faith like that above other people who showed faith, but not that strong of faith. When people showed honest trust, it made Jesus very happy. He loved that they trusted, not because it made him look good, but because they were going in the right direction. Too often, we trust like with one hand on, one hand off. It's not full trust, is it? It's taking a slight step, right? Because you've already got one hand off and you're making, it's like a little kid learning to walk and you're like, let the hand go, come on. They really don't want to do it. Jesus wanted to see them trust in him for honest, good reason. Here we come to the controversial part. Verse 41. Then Jesus moved with compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him. There is, let me put it this way. The New Testament was originally written in Greek, right? And we do not have the original copies. We have very few originals of any kind from that early of a time period. The ones that we do have of other writings are in places that are dry with no moisture. So the sands of Egypt or the Dead Sea areas. Makes sense, right? Mark was written to where? Rome, the church at Rome. It's not exactly a dry place with no moisture. So the original manuscript, probably lasted a century, maybe 2 centuries. And then you had other copies made of that. But as time goes by, every now and then you end up getting just mess-ups in the copying process. God inspired the original writings. He didn't inspire copyists or even translators for that instance. And so there is another reading. There's a different word used in a few copies, and it indicates anger. Jesus was angry. Is it possible that that's what's here? I don't think so. I think compassion is exactly what it was. But I want to tell you why this is important. There are some Bible scholars that do not believe in the Bible, but they found it a pretty good thing to go into and a good way in academia. And so, if they don't believe in it, what are they likely to do? Poke at it, hate on it. And we have enough sensationalism in America that, by golly, you can sell books on this stuff. And they do. And one such scholar, and I don't deny that he's very brilliant, he started out claiming to be a Christian. I doubt he ever really was. But he lost anything close to trusting as he went further in his studies. And before anyone says, well, that's proof that this isn't true, others went in trying to prove it wrong and came out believers. So let's keep that in mind. But this guy looks at this and he says there's a textual variant here that could mean that Jesus was angry. And if Jesus is angry, what does that show you about your Jesus? It still wouldn't change anything. There are times Jesus gets angry in the scriptures that nobody disagrees on what that wording is whatsoever. The question is, was it righteous anger or not? And it would be. Now, one scholar says if it was anger here, the context might look towards being upset that the leper was not following proper protocol. Even though he was trusting, he was actually violating a lot of laws, and he should have had respect and done things right. Interesting. But the evidence is compassion is the word is used. Let me tell you something about Jesus. There are times he gets angry. I think he cleaned a temple one time, temple complex area, because of his anger. There are times he gets irritated at his disciples. That's not sinful. Just because someone gets angry doesn't mean it's sinful. If somebody is playing on their phone while driving and hits another vehicle, is there not reason to be upset? The difference is when you're upset, but you go further and you want to attack them for it. Okay, that's giving into sinful anger. Righteous anger says, that was wrong. You should never have done that, and you should admit it. Righteous anger acknowledges the wrong. Jesus acts with righteous anger at times. We don't deny that, but how quickly, how easily someone can try to twist that and say, your Jesus is a horrible man with anger issues. And yet, what do we see over and over and over? Jesus shows compassion. His righteous anger works with his righteous compassion too. They're not against each other. This context and the manuscripts point more towards compassion, and I think that's the right reading, and I think that's what we have here. And you may say, Brother Jerry, why'd you bring that up? Because you may hear on YouTube, or you may read someone said this, or you may hear from a friend, I heard this, and I'd rather let you know ahead of time that there are different words used sometimes in a copy. And it may have been because one copyist missed a single letter. And you may say, that wouldn't change anything. Oh, it does. It can do that in English too. Very quickly, one letter difference can make a big difference. Sometimes it may sound crazy. And other times, you start to look at it and go, oh goodness. So we have to study it and look at what's the oldest reading, what's the most likely reading. What fits the context? Compassion fits here. Let me give you one interesting reading that to tell you how funny it can get. And I believe this is in, I can't remember if it's one of Paul's writings. And the normal reading is, we were gentle among you. Another reading says, we were children among you. And the most humorous one is, we were horses among you. And the difference in the letters is not that much. That's how different the words can be. We can automatically, based on the context and his use of horses, we could probably take that one out pretty quickly and easily. And it's a nonsense reading. But if you read my notes or if you read my journals, you will go, man, he used a nonsense word there every now and then. It happens, okay? Copyists, scribes do that. So is it we were children among you, or we were gentle among you? Some would say children because it shows that we weren't controlling you. I think gentle is the right one because he talks about, he uses terms that really go to that. And that's what we have in our English Bibles, okay? So things like that can come up. A copy is a copy. They make mistakes. When you handwrite stuff, you will make mistakes. Have you ever heard someone say, well, we got computers now? Exactly. Have you ever read the paper or a book and they misspell something? It happens. We got all this technology and we still make mistakes. So this doesn't mean we should doubt our Bible. it means we should recognize that our God has done an amazing job giving us the Bible. And in the process, we've actually had to study it. And it turns out it is amazing and wonderful. And by having to study it to make sure we have the right wording, we're able to see it and we are able to prove it to other people. So, back to this point. Jesus has compassion. Jesus does not sit back with revulsion. No, instead, Jesus is moved within himself with compassion. And I liken compassion to more of an action word. It's not a awe, it's a huh. An awe looks at something, or you see someone, sometimes it's some of the social media you may see a funny video. And the funniest ones are, sadly, when people are doing really, really crazy things. Oh, I'm going to jump off 3 buildings and try to, do this. And they jump off, and halfway through, they're doing all right, and then, whoop, boom. Thank goodness they get up and they're okay, but you're just like, why did you do that? A lot of times, we may go, ooh, I feel bad for them. But there's a difference between feeling bad and acting upon that. If you are there and able. Sometimes we are unable, maybe because it's fear. I tell this story every now and then because it is a real story. It really happened. I was there at a local association meeting where an older pastor got up to talk to a report that was given. And he literally had a heart attack in the pulpit. The reason I bring that up is he hit the pulpit, and it was up on a pretty large stage. And I mean, it fell to the ground. You heard the crack, and everybody go, and nobody did anything for at least 10 seconds. At least 10 seconds. Because they were surprised to such an extent, it was almost traumatic. Finally, one of the guy that I was there with, the preacher I was there with, got up and said to another one, "Get over there!" Because the guy he yelled at to get over there was a trained paramedic. Okay? That's compassion. It's more than just, oh my goodness, that's bad. It's acting upon it. He knew he couldn't do it, but he knew who could, and he got his attention. And that guy, once his focus was on there, outside of being just bewildered, went right up there and got up there. They thought they might be able to keep him with us, but he passed away that day. It was sad to see. But there's a difference between feeling sad and compassion. Okay? And I'm not saying the other people in that building, there were a lot of them, I'm not saying they weren't compassionate. But like a lot of us, they were bewildered. In this instance, though, you got time to see this person. And with a lot of Jesus' own disciples, no doubt some of them would have naturally felt revulsion, maybe even annoyance, that this leper's coming to us. Don't make us unclean. But one thing I want you to see about Jesus is, number one, he's got compassion. Number two, you can't make him unclean. He cleanses people. Too often we hear, just like we talked about this morning, where people will say, Jesus can't forgive me and everything I've done. No. Stop that. You can't soil Jesus. He cleans you. It's just your choice whether or not you go to him. That's the difference. That is the difference. And so this leper, who has been ostracized, who's been hated, you may say, some people, when they're pushed down enough, they'll do something. And sometimes they stay where they're at. You know what I mean? A lot of people, the trauma of their situation, the sadness, the melancholy, the depression they're in, they won't move. This guy hears about Jesus and he goes to him. He doesn't touch Jesus. I think he honestly keeps the distance, which is one of the reasons why I think that rare anger reading just doesn't make sense. Jesus is moved with compassion. He kneels before Jesus. He honors Jesus. And he says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people come to Jesus. Some may have even demanded healing or just expected healing. He admits, you can heal me. If you want to, you can heal me. He puts the ball in Jesus' court. Might I add, there is something very, very amazing about the way he thought that through. That sometimes I think we forget, that I have forgotten. Sometimes we pray with maybe the expectation God will act on what we ask. And even if we may even have excellent motives. Someone's got cancer. Lord, take that away, please. Someone has been in a wreck. Lord, help them get healed, please. Somebody's in distress. Lord, give them strength, please. Sometimes God knows better, and God doesn't do that. That's hard for us because we have the idea if someone's in need, we got to help them. But we don't know the whole of it. I am not a trained paramedic. Not even close. I know a handful of things. But I do know this. There was one time that I was teaching in prison. Once again, teacher, not resident. And there was a guy there, and he had told me that he would at times have seizures. I'd never really seen a seizure till that day. And he went straight into a seizure. My first thought was to hold him down. Turns out that's not what you need to do. That will hurt them. Just so happened that one of my other students had been a medical doctor in the outside world. So he got over there very quickly, and he was like, guys, stay back. If you need to, put your hand under here. That way his head does not hit the ground so hard. We can't, if we hold him back, it's going to hurt him. That was a guy that was the person that I should look to. I would have hurt things if I did it the way I thought. We don't know. God may allow some situations in order to get someone to a point where they can make a good decision. He may get them into a situation that actually helps them in ways they would have never believed. We think, well, this should be this. Well, if there's any pain or discomfort, sometimes pain and discomfort are necessary. All right? My children, my older ones not so much anymore, but my children, especially when they were little, any pain and discomfort from a shot was considered horrible. But you and I both know that a vaccine can be very helpful. Or a shot full of antibiotics can be helpful. But they don't know that. So we can't always take that mentality that pain is always a bad thing. It's not a preferable thing. I say that for this reason. He acknowledges it may not be Jesus' desire to do it. And he's not going to blame Jesus if Jesus decides not to do it. That's the kind of way we need to have. And I've been in situations where I've asked for things, and I've been hurt that God didn't answer it the way that I thought. And then later on I understood better because I got to see a broader picture. Oh, okay. So the point of the matter of that is we need to trust God. But Jesus was moved with compassion. He didn't just feel sorry for him. He acted upon it. Look what Jesus did. He stretched out his hand and touched him. That, according to the traditions, would make Jesus unclean. But Jesus don't get unclean. Guess what happens to this guy? He no longer has leprosy. I'm about to make a joke. Please understand this is a joke. Jesus is able to cleanse stuff like that with ease. Man, he could shift some pretty amazing stains. It's a joke. I don't mean it. But let me tell you this. If you got a stain of the heart, a stain of what's happened in your past, things you've done wrong, well, that's always going to be there. Well, it happened. But Jesus can cleanse you from the guilt, cleanse you from the wrong. You'll remember it. Learn from it. But if you've been saved by Jesus, you're not stained forever. You're cleansed. All right? This is better than OxyClean, I promise you. Jesus cleanses forever. Jesus says, I am willing, be cleansed. As soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Now, wouldn't that be amazing? Now, we got some pretty good technology today and medical treatments. But I have yet to see one that just automatically makes someone from blind to see. That makes someone from death's door to fully healed. From someone with literal leprosy to actually having no leprosy left and just being fully 100% normal or healthy. Jesus was not a scientist. He was the Son of God. Verse 43, and he strictly warned him and sent him away at once. And he said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Verse 45, however, he went out and began to proclaim. The idea is he kept on telling people and spread the matter so that Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in deserted places. And they came to him from every direction. Was it wrong for this guy to disregard what Jesus told him? Yes. In the process, it does go to show that Jesus' fame spread. Both are true. But there was a consequence that this guy wouldn't have recognized. A lot of times we're so thankful we want to go tell everybody, but that may not be the best thing at the moment. If someone does something nice for us, they may say, I don't want anyone to know about it. Why wouldn't you want everybody to know about it? They may not want the notoriety. All right? Imagine someone helps someone financially. Don't go tell everybody, I just wanted to help you. I don't want any notoriety. They go tell everybody. Guess what everybody's going to want? Can you help me too? Can you help me too? That may have been the only thing that they could have helped with at that time. Jesus did have the power to help people. But it may not have been the will of the Father to help every single one of those people that wanted help at that time. And so it actually has adverse consequences for the ministry of Jesus. He can't go into that city anymore. He has to do things outside the city. It actually causes difficulty. Think of some of the people that couldn't get out of the city to him. So I want us to think and understand there are things Jesus teaches in his teaching that seem hard. We should still follow it, even though it's difficult. Now we should understand it as best we can, but we should follow it because there's a reason he gave that teaching. If we don't fully understand it, that doesn't mean it is without merit. It just means we need to learn. But I think there's something to be said. If Jesus said it, I need to believe it. I need to follow it. I need to accept it. Sometimes that's not easy, is it? Remember, they had an issue in John's Gospel, I think chapter 9, where you had a blind man, and they asked the question, well, who sinned, this man or his family? And Jesus says, neither. That really was something to them, because in their mind, if you have a malady like that, somebody sinned. The fact of maladies like that is that there is sin. Sin has distorted what God created. It has corrupted. It is destroying God's creation in a sense that it's undoing what God had made that was very good. However, that doesn't mean direct sin had anything to do with it. If someone's killed in a car wreck that they didn't cause, was it a direct sin that caused it for them? Not necessarily, is it? And so Jesus had to set them straight on that. That wasn't easy. It's easier just to think if something bad happens because you did something bad. But we all know, if we're honest, that's not always true. So sometimes we have to recognize we don't understand and we need to trust Jesus. So what can we learn from this? Number one, Jesus was compassionate. And anytime people bring up Jesus' anger, look at the context. Did he have a reason to be upset? And yes, he did. But did he lash out with hatred like others did? He didn't seek to kill people, did he? That's a pretty big difference. Number two, we see that Jesus did not act in revulsion, but in true compassion and care and love. He actually acted upon it. And that he should be listened to. Now, undeniably, this man would have, even though the scripture doesn't say it, without doubt probably did go at some point, did the offerings and the sacrifices, because he would want to be accepted within the broader community. And the reason that he goes out and tells people and they listen, he probably did do everything proper so he could be back included in broader community with family and friends and such. We are told to be witnesses of what Jesus has done for us. We're also told to follow the teaching of Christ. So we need to do that. Some people will say, well, go witness in every possible way. There are limitations. There are some places it's not appropriate to go to. You know what I mean? It's inappropriate to just barge into someone's house. So we do need to recognize there are limitations. When we have the opportunity to witness about Jesus, we should witness about Jesus. But we need to do it his way, not our way. I heard a preacher one time say this. I get where he's coming from, but I wouldn't do it. He said, if I could get people to believe in Jesus by taking my shotgun and pointing it at their face, I'd do it. Oh, no, I don't think I'd do that. Coercion will never bring belief. But the point was he wants people to be saved. But people have got to actually believe. Desire and fervency or being dedicated should never trump following what Jesus said to do. We don't coerce. we connect and give our testimony. We testify what Jesus has done from the Bible and in our own lives. And so we should follow what Jesus said. All right. I may have been a little all over the place. It was not my intention to, but we learned a little more about Jesus. There's a lot more to this passage than when we just read it sometimes, isn't there? Of course, remember, there's all that background that is a very different world than the one we live in today. So how should we understand this today for us? Number one, we need to tell people that Jesus is compassionate. Number two, you cannot make Jesus unclean. Number three, Jesus is worth listening to. So we should be compassionate. We should tell everyone, hey, we aren't perfect. We've committed sins in the past. And we're still going to sin as we're going through this life. But Jesus forgives us. But we're not embracing that sin. We're embracing Jesus. And we want to follow him in every way we can. We will be a spectacle to people, but hopefully in the best way. Hopefully when people look at us, and at first they may make fun of us, as time goes by, maybe they'll look at us and go, They're consistent. They're consistent about their beliefs. This person treats them bad and they still love that person. Why? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you about Jesus. May that be the opportunity that we're given, and may we take advantage of that opportunity in the best way. Any questions or comments? Yay, nay, maybe say. May God bless you. Please don't forget, next Saturday, or this coming Saturday, we have work day starting at 10 a.m. We're going to try to have a lunch, kind of in between. I don't know what all we'll be able to get done. All I know is Brother Jerry is going to sit here and listen to what he's told to do and then do it. All right? I'm not just going to sit here. I'm just going to do what I'm told to do. But if you have a specific ability that you have or something you're really good at, a skill, we would love for you to help us by using it here on a Saturday as we clean up, as we fix things, as we do all that we can do. Please don't forget, men's breakfast is the last Saturday of the month at Cracker Barrel. I almost said Outback. That'd be a weird breakfast. I've heard of steak and eggs. I've never had it. But we're at Cracker Barrel at 9 a.m. We have food, but we have a lot of fellowship. So hope to see men there and get to enjoy that. Anything that I might have forgotten,